Welcome to What's Next, previews, predictions, and prognostications. I'm your host, Rhett Power, and my co-host is John Baldoni. John?
Thank you, Rhett. This is a show that examines where we are now and where we go to prepare for what's next. Whether you own your own company or work for one, you want to know how to get from here to there.
We interviewed thought leaders and doers from the worlds of business, science, medicine, economics, media, psychology, who will help us shape the new normal post-COVID-19.
The perspective that these folks will bring us is enables us to focus on where we are now and how we begin to think about how we get to where we want to go. So
we welcome your questions. So let's get started. John, you're going to do the introductions of our esteemed colleagues here.
I am, and we're, both Rhett and I are just pleased because we are two guests, Lou Carter and David Nour, who is better known by his last name, Nour, are friends of ours, and we regard both of them with great friendship, and thank you. Lou's a trailblazer in the field of organizational development with groundbreaking research and a field called emotional connection as a means to create positive value-based moments inside of organizations and out. He's a founder and CEO of Best Practice Institute. He's a best-selling author, and he's worked for probably every company you can name. Same goes for Nour, who's a growth strategist, thought leader, and global keynote speaker on relationship economics. What's that? It's the concept of quantifiable value of business relationships. Best-selling book, delivers lots of keynotes and now all virtual. He's the CEO of the Nour Group, a consulting firm that advises top global leaders and boards of corporations, and he's worked for all the major companies you can think of. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have both of you on board today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us on. Thank you for me on. Yeah, appreciate it. And thank you for specifying that you're our friend before. That's the thing you're supposed to do as a journalist.
It is good to be with this powerhouse as well.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Well, I thought we were gonna until John until we started working on the questions, I thought we might have sort of just an improv hour of you guys doing comedy. Because the three of you are pretty hilarious, but I guess we have to ask serious questions since we are on LinkedIn. Let me ask you guys this, Lou and David. Do you think the pandemic presents us with an opportunity to sort of reinvent ourselves? And if you think so, sort of give me some thoughts on that. What makes you think that this is a great time to sort of rethink everything you're doing?
Lou, if it's okay with you, I'll jump in and would love to hear your perspective as well. So Rhett and John, unequivocally, yes. I've actually never been beyond the incredible lives and lives lost. I've actually never been so energized. And having spoken with 64 senior executives over the last really 3 to 4 weeks, initially there was this massive shock. I think they're beyond that now, and there really are more and more thinking of COVID-19, not, less so as a beginning, middle, and an end, and more so as this new norm and new approaches to adapting. So if you think about it a second, 6 to 8 weeks of now working remote from home, and they're being productive, right? For most parts, my enterprise clients, people are getting things done, and there's actually some sectors that are absolutely thriving, and others are realizing if we can quickly get teams together to really think differently, really leverage our core competencies and come up with new ideas and beyond just conceptual to the concrete quickly, why wouldn't we want to keep going with that and really use this as an impetus to rethink, reimagine, if not re-envision key parts of our business?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Lou, are you feeling the same, or what's your perspective?
Yeah, Nour and I do agree on this. And one of the things that I've seen that could be a little bit different is to say I'm the CEO of Best Practices too. So for the past 20 years, I've promoted best practices in leadership development, talent management, wrote books in it since 1998. And since then, we've never had a time when we could say historically that we have to really let go of all of our best practices, because this is a completely new norm. And I've talked to people from anything from Silicon Valley VC who are okay with their runway, right? They're slowing the burn and cutting their employees in half. It's okay though for those people who are kind of at that top, so they're less thinking about what's happening in the future for them, right? They're just doing specific tactical maneuvers. There's no vision related to it, which is fine. Let it go. And then others who are in Chapter 11. And what do you do in Chapter 11? The companies that are in Chapter 11, they bring in new CEOs right now who cut. They're not the most popular people. They're doing more transactional change, not transformational change. And then there's the people that Nour are talking about who are thriving and they're thinking about transformation. And for that group of people who are out there, like Nour said, they're creating those new normals and they're co-creating it. Nour and I love this concept of co-creation, and we both use it with our clients. And in co-creation, we say, look, there's stuff from the past that has occurred, and other companies have done these certain things before COVID and the pandemic. Now, though, we have to use design teams, bring people together who actually can create the new normal, create strategies, processes, practices, goals, visions that are new than ever before. We're letting go of those things in the past and creating new. And that requires a completely different way of designing and also rehearsing and developing new practices that probably most of us have not practiced before.
What does that take? I mean, sorry to jump in, John, but I wanted to, I mean, that's an interesting thing, right? How do you go about making that sort of wholesale change like that and incorporating, I mean, how do you put a team together to do that? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Let me jump in with 3 to 5 things that both I'm coaching clients to think about, but also I see them doing exceptionally well. So Rhett, number one, they get very focused on their core strengths, their core capabilities, right? Not everything that we do, but what do we do exceptionally well? Number two, those that are able to maneuver and quickly put teams together, let's face it, as Lou mentioned, they have a really strong balance sheet, right? They've got a great financial position. They might be hoarding cash, but I don't know of any organization that can cut its way to growth. So they realize that they have to quickly, which is the third point, incredible speed and agility, right? This is not a time for a battalion. This is a time for SEAL Team 6. How do we get sharpest minds that we have in the organization from, and that's about labor flex, right? Take some of the sharpest minds in the team from marketing and sales and product development and engineering and process and supply chain, quickly put a team together. And the other thing for number 4, I love lines in the sand, right? So by May 1, we got to get this idea identified, the market opportunity, make sure there's real demand for it across multiple types of customers we're talking about and talking to. Let's quickly prototype, build something we can get out in the market, and then learn from that. And the 5th part is learn daily, adapt, and really put it together. So core competency, strong balance sheet, SEAL Team 6, quickly prototype something, learn from it, and quickly adapt it to the next iteration of it.
Lou, I want to jump in. Good stuff. Because I heard you get on a conversation with our colleague, Dr. Julie Rosenberg, and you were talking about what it takes to open up an office. We need to be real practical, and you gave some interesting insights into that. Lou, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think it dovetails on Nour's as well, because open up an office means you really do need to let people co-create what their future should be. Can you imagine just what's happening in states right now with riots and people having fights, and what happens when you get on an airplane that is filled? People get angry at each other. They're wearing gas masks. They're putting on KN95s, and they want people to stay away from them, and you have to have police intervention. So, this is going to happen within organizations soon. We're asked to stay home and not catch the disease. Then we're asked to go out into public and catch the disease so we can enable herd immunity, right? So, which one is it? So, we have to kind of choose. So with employees, and this really starts with HR first. And even with your working with a CEO, you have to work with HR for this, and HR and talent needs to come together to design this. And there's a survey we're doing on this right now that is basically around, what is it that people want in this new workplace as we move on site? What is it that they want when they're remote? So just imagine a design team coming together that is HR, CEOs, and communications, and saying, look, this is the things that we want people to discuss within those various factions of the company when you come forward. Coming into things, I always think process. So the process is you work in dyads, two people saying, what are we doing well in this process? What can we do better? And what's the one thing that we should do right now in order to make this happen? And then report back out, go into groups, say, okay, let's talk about the actual practices for coming back into the workplace. What's going to be safest? What's going to be best for the productivity and the processes within our company. So we have to be specific for people so that we don't create mass panic. And that the possibility for chaos is enormous. The possibility for chaotic, which is what DeHock, he created this book called The Chaotic Age. He was the CEO of Visa International, is much higher. So in order to create a chaotic organization, we have to have co-creation, because without it, we're basically left to anybody's devices coming in, fighting, and being scared for their own health, wealth, safety, and processes, their own internal processes.
Okay.
Yeah. David, what do you think, what kind of companies are winning right now, and what companies are falling behind?
I think the single thread that I see in not just sectors, but companies within sectors that are doing well, first and foremost, it really is a visionary leader who says, this is an opportunity for us to really coalesce the best version of ourselves and really, number one, serve our existing customers. Number two, quickly scan the market and leverage our relationships to identify what I call faint market signals. So, Rhett, if you and I talk about something, it might be an anomaly. You and John talk about it, it comes up again. Lou and I talk about it, comes up. That's now more than just an exception. That's starting to become part of the new norm. And great leaders have their radars on, and they see these, and they catch these early faint signals, which then they bring in. And as I said earlier, speed and agility, incredibly valuable to quickly. And most people also think of innovation as a product or service. We're all fans of Alex Osterwalder and the whole business model innovation idea of, quickly, how can we quickly create, is this a product we're going to sell, or is this something we could potentially rent? I'm reminded of Martin Lindstrom often talks about in the 2008 financial meltdown, a lot of people thought the price of cars was too high, so they discounted their car prices. And he probably brings up Hyundai's assurance program, and they said, no. If you lose your job, we'll take the car back. And they gave that safety net to people. And Martin interviewed the CEO, and they returned 5 cars. So it was one of the most successful programs ever, because they really thought about what is the angst, what is keeping people from kind of engaging, and they went to the root cause of it, not just here's another product or solution or discounted fee. So
it actually helped make them a brand. I mean, it
elevated their brand, because they understood what their target audience was really struggling with. And back to your question about, leaders and companies that are doing well, they're really attuned to what is the market telling them, what is their current customers, what are the problems they're trying to solve, and classic case of they identified that need and quickly come up with a way to fill it.
Cool. Lou, you want to jump in, but I want to throw in something a little differently. when you talk to CEOs and leaders in companies, what are you not hearing? What are you not hearing from them
Yeah. So let me answer this a different way. I want to say the things that I'm hearing well, because what I heard really well is that they need a different way for people to be more agile as learners. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's say you have a CFO who believes in traditional accounting methods and cost cutting, traditional. And they have a philosophy that employees come first, customers come first. And the CEO wants to enable everybody to have the same salary, not furlough anyone, okay? And also wants to enable their benefits, wants to ensure that everybody is taken care of, that patients get the same level of care, customers get the same level of care. Very different than what a traditional CFO would think of. And they have to become agile to this new kind of CEO thinking. The most transformational CEOs right now have prepared for this. They're the most resilient. They've prepared for this financially. So the thing that I look for when I talk to a great CEO, I call them career CEOs. They're different than fly by night, or they jump from one company to another and they sell one and they get a whole bunch of capital. Career CEOs set themselves up for situations like this so they can make decisions that would be antithetical to things that a typical accountant would allow for.
Yeah,
that's what I look for.
Yeah. For both of you guys, what would you tell? I mean, I think one of the conversations I haven't heard a lot of talk about is how we're going to handle going back to work, and how companies are going to handle people who aren't comfortable. And I'll give you an example. I've got a son with asthma, right? And I am not going to be comfortable really, and he's got a lung issue. I'm not going to be really comfortable with him with going back to work in a traditional setting. If my boss says, "Hey, you've got to go," you got to come back to the office. How do companies handle that? How do we handle that as in the right way? And what is the right way? And
yeah, I think of it in terms of three ideas. One, Rhett, I don't believe everybody needs to go back to work. In terms of, look at what we've learned. In 8 weeks, we've learned there's a lot we can get done remotely. So, I think of physical manufacturing, where I've got to be on a line to make something, right? That's possible. Or services, right? It's very difficult, and telehealth is taking off in a big way. But when you have to deliver a service, you got to physically be there. But one of the things I think we're learning to discern is, if I'm in the technology sector, or if I'm in even professional services, look at what the four of us do. I'm doing a lot more remote coaching. We're setting up a virtual, studio to do remote sessions, right? So there's a lot more we can do remotely. Number two, incumbent on companies to figure out potentially how to shift their value delivery. So if your value today is delivered through physical proximity, and that is going to continue to be a challenge for the next 12, 18 plus months, you better shift your value proposition away where, how can we deliver that? And I love the delivery guys that leave your food at the door and they take, 10 steps back. Or, are there other ways to even those kinds of things, deliver that value differently? So do we need everybody to come back? Can we shift our business model to deliver that value differently? 3, what a fantastic time to think about. Let's stop doing all the stuff that's not adding any value, right? So most of your audience may have heard of zero-based costing or zero-based accounting. It's time to go back to zero-based efforts and staffing. Do we really need to do all those things, or can we really pare that down to the core essence that really adds value to our customers and our market?
Lou, you want to jump in there? And Lou, because you are an expert in culture, is culture, as you answer, is culture being redefined or reinforced?
Is culture being redefined or reinforced? I think culture is always iterative. So it flows and it ebbs. It's something. And if it isn't, then there's something wrong. So there's 4 different culture types I always see. It's open, closed, random, and synchronous. So basically, those culture types, they ebb and flow different ways, and you can make them functional in different ways. So closed, you think of a really bad military situation, right, where the caption is really actually telling soldiers to do things they should not be doing, or they're not putting themselves in the line of action. Think of random as a college dormitory where you're shooting banana shooters at each other and hurting each other, giving welts. You think of a synchronous system as an elementary school where they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, but they stop immediately when the principal comes in. And finally, we think of open systems as a jury, which can become completely dysfunctional when you come to a hung jury. So each of those systems, in terms of cultural systems, can become super dysfunctional, disabled. And in this situation where we're redefining, this is the best time to look at all of our dysfunctions and say, okay, this has been happening, and I need to change this particular part so that we can say, all right, there's somebody back home who can't come in because they have asthma. They cannot communicate with asthma. And in this prior system, because it's closed, we wouldn't have even cared about that because we didn't listen to people. We weren't agile. Now we're in a new system. If we don't think about that, we're going to harm people. So our prior sort of indirect or ways that we talk to each other or understood each other are far different now than they ever have been before. They have to change. They have to be agile, unless we're going to kill people.
Well, you're not going to stay in a place that's not, right? I mean, if you have an option, you're going to go somewhere else where that's appreciated, I think.
You have to go somewhere else. You have to go somewhere else that's a different system that gets enabled in a different way, or that is willing to enable themselves. So if you're in a closed system that formerly really truly told you what to do and didn't care of the results, or didn't do it themselves and feel it themselves, be empathetic toward it, and that's not your system. You go to a synchronous one that's thinking all the same way, and find one that is enabled, because there's a lot of dysfunction in a synchronous system where everybody's thinking the same way. You can go drink the Kool-Aid. So you have to make sure that system is open enough, agile enough, malleable enough to be able to listen to what your needs are. Yeah. Go somewhere else, please, before you get hurt and others get hurt.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's going to force. I think if you're not open to that change, I think I question whether you're going to survive, frankly, as a company. I mean,
it's adaptability. It's Darwin's law. I mean, it's the way in which that we can work within our world. That we are more than ever having to adapt to our environment, and if we don't adapt to the way other people either enforce to us, we're in trouble. So we have to be able to know the cues, see the cues, social or otherwise. And companies are going to be held to greater standards now more than ever about how you treat and are with employees, and create a sense of safety, not just for emotional and psychological safety now, but physical safety, health safety. This is a far different world. So it's going back to the times in elementary school when people were a lot more liable for your health. Now everybody is going to become liable for your health. Insurance will change, finances will change, retention rates will change. We're in a new world. Just wait. You're going to have a nurse inside. Your medical office is going to change. You're going to become a hospital yourselves. If you haven't done it already, start your budgeting. Because you're going to have people who have needs, medical needs, who are coming in your front doors. Take care of them. Don't have each other harm them.
It's exactly where I want to go right now to both of you, and we'll flip it to Nour. Where will we be a year from now? Because the subtitle of this show is predictions. So where do you think, and we can work back from there. So Nour, I'm going to put you on the spot. Where do you think we'll be in a year?
Yeah, I again, none of us have a crystal ball. The data or the information I'm sharing is based on perspectives by very different audiences that I've listened to. Number one, I believe you've heard of the V-shaped recovery of a fairly quick. You've also heard of a U-shape where it's more prolonged. I actually believe it'll be something like a Y, where certain sectors are going to come back a lot stronger than others. So I believe any business model that's predicated by physical proximity, travel, tourism, restaurants, theaters. Sorry, but I thought bowling alleys were petri dishes before all this. I'm not going back to a bowling alley anytime soon, right? So I think those businesses are going to really struggle. I've got several clients in travel. My heart goes out to them. Again, people didn't like the middle seat before all this. The idea of sitting in one just makes most people cringe. So I think a year from now, there will be sectors that are going to continue to struggle. I think we'll travel, for example, for leisure. In my family camp, we always make summer plans, and we can't wait to go somewhere. But you know what? We're talking about a car trip somewhere close by, not getting on a plane to travel somewhere. Certain, I think, innovation, believe it or not, is going to get accelerated. I've been talking about adaptive innovation for a number of years, and this is the impetus for that. I think you're going to see a lot more of, human enabled AI, right? I still want to do the knowledge work, the creative work, but let me really let the mundane, those kind of AI, ML machines really take over a lot of the mundane. As Lou mentioned, I think cultures are going to dramatically adapt. About a year ago, the open office space was all the rage. Guess what? They're now death traps, right? So I think we're gonna stay away from, again, think of any business that's predicated by physical proximity. I believe is going to continue to struggle.
There's also already productivity death traps. Now they're just real death traps.
Lou, I'm putting you on the spotlight now. So where will we be? What will it look like a year from now?
Yeah, I love how we talked about predictive analytics, because we can only look at what's been kind of in the past. You can go on at night. You can go to futures and see what it may be like tomorrow morning in the U.S. by looking at Asian markets, right, or markets overseas. It's really the same, I think, for us in terms of business and where we're going to be in a year, because it does ebb and flow. I agree with Nour's model about why. The why model. Here's the thing. If you just go on Amazon, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And you can see on Amazon, there's a tool that you can add to it to look at sales and to look at profit margins, to look at sales, to see which ones have high demand and low supply. I recently have done it because I want to see which industries are selling the most, which ones are not the most. It says a lot about sort of where we're going, and right now at least. And there's stuff that you can assume based upon our health concerns, and things like masks are coming back into play. Obviously, they're like highest demand, lowest supply, but others that sort of are not as obvious, which camping equipment, they're coming back up, right? So people are going to be taking more car trips, like Nour said. So a lot of automobile supplies are coming more into place. More home supplies are coming into place. Things that you'll see. So manufacturing is going to play a big part in this. A lot of delivery is going to be taking a big part of this. A lot of healthcare is going to be shifting into telemedicine. So there's a shift, as Nour said, to more AI, to more technology, to more even robotics. The way that I see this too is that we're going to have deliveries. We will have deliveries in a year, 2 years from now by drone. It will not always be by a person, and those drones will be completely infection free. In airports, we're going to have infection units so that we are completely disinfected before we even go to touch a kiosk. There'll be less human in contact completely. There'll be retina scans, facial scans, heating scans. The world's just going to change massively in the way that we interact with technology and each other. There'll be a much more distancing, and a lot of the technologies that were once on the shelf collecting dust and nobody had use for previously, augmented reality, AI, robotics, drones, and they couldn't really invest a lot of money into, will become reality now in the next 1 to 10 years.
Do you guys see, I was having an interesting conversation with this guy. He's a UN AI. He's on there, he drives their UN and how they look at AI around the globe. And we were talking about how, and I thought it was fascinating, how sort of the Chinese society has accepted really intrusive measures to monitor where people are, where they're going, where they've been, as a way to sort of manage this disease. And we were kind of speculating, is that something, will it get to that level in the US? Will US society sort of accept AI in that way, that's used for tracking where we are, tracking where we've been, who we've come in contact with? And is that, I mean, do you see that happening, or you see us pushing back on that kind of?
So the way I look at it is, if you look at post 9/11 here in the US, right, we changed a lot of our behaviors when our security, when our safety was on the line. Is privacy a concern? Absolutely, unequivocally, yes. Is our health, is our safety a bigger concern? You better believe it. And I think very similar to how we adapted to, you know what, you can't take liquids on a plane, and we're going to bolt the pilot door, and, you know, you get ready, you know, federal marshals on flights. And so we took measures, some that were uncomfortable with. What are you going to, you know, before 9/11, if you told me you were going to pat me down, I was going to say, back up, big boy. Right. So I think again, post this isn't one of those really interesting, again, you've heard of inflection points or touchstone events that's going to change the way we look at our health, our safety. So Lou brought up, you know, physicians and clinics. I've got a couple of clients right now who are either, I'm telling you, interviewing health professionals for an on-premise clinic, or they're exploring an on-premise clinic with a local health system, because they believe they're going to need that for their people to feel safe, to feel like, you know, I can come back and work in an environment, right? So, you know, clients are looking at putting health tents at the entrance to their building so you can get checked before. South Korea is already doing this, right? You can get checked before you come in. Even if you have a cold, guess what? You're going to go back home because, or God help you if you got seasonal allergies, right? You're not coming in. So if you're safe, you get to come in, and it's going to change. Lou alluded to this. Think about it. I don't believe we no longer need corporate lobbies. So we're going to turn those lobbies into now a UV-based sanitation airlock that you're going to get sanitized as you come in and sanitized as you leave. And we're going to be wearing wearables. Samsung just released an app on their watches that will alert you if somebody's within 6 feet away. So 6 feet has just become our now new physical space. And I think you're going to see more and more of that type of thinking and behavior that says, is my privacy security important? Absolutely. But you know what? My health or my kids' asthma is a hell of a lot more important. And I'm willing to give up some of those concerns to ensure we're all safe.
Lou, well, you know, he was saying this morning, what he was saying was they've done some research on this, and that people are actually okay using AI and to answering basic medical questions. They're very honest with the machines, and they're very open about where they've been, who they've been in contact with. And it's actually been really interesting to watch how those systems are really helping in the fight against this in a lot of different places. And so anyway, I thought it was interesting that they're using AI to sort of contact trace and do that kind of questioning of people. I mean, I thought it was very interesting.
Lou, I want to pick up on this, but I want to throw a wrench into this conversation you talked about, and Nour picked up on, was health professionals in your place of work. Are we predicating that on the fact that we have no faith in a vaccine or reasonable therapies? And should we have a vaccine within 2 years, what effect would that have? Do you think we will go back, or what's your perspective on that?
So obviously I have to say that I'm not a medical professional, so I can't say anything about the sort of the time in which the vaccine may come. I mean, I did read it was about 4 years in a typical situation that a proper FDA approval could be allowed. I'm hearing the 2-year time frame now as well. So what I see is, you know, the vaccine will abate. However, I don't think the psyche will abate, if you will. The culture will abate. At least for people who are thinking, knowing, being, doing humans, it won't abate. and we may have political affiliations or thinking that may inflect or shift the way that we behave. And at the same time, once we're able to see the effects come fall of that kind of shift in thinking of people who do put their lives in the line, who do not need to. So that's who are not required to. So we'll really change the way that we think about the illness. Here's the thing as well. There are people, it shows there are 60% people do not have to go out of their homes in terms of the workforce. They can stay remote. There's a study that was done at 60% can do most of, if not all of their work at home. So it's about adaptation from organization and leadership side as to how we can enable them to do work from home. For those who absolutely unequivocally have to go to work, it's about what Nour is saying. It's about those new predictive technologies, about being completely getting completely stopped from having any type of infection. So we have to, as organizations, invest a lot of money. This is not just a little, this is a lot. These are in the billions of dollars in technologies, and put Moore's Law into effect as quick as possible. So every year we get a new microchip on these technologies, and soon they'll come to the consumer side. We have to encourage companies to put their budgets toward this so that we can have some normalcy in society as soon as possible.
Yeah, very good. John, you have any other questions?
Yeah, I want to just, let's make it personal here for a second. Nour, you've got a high school senior at home, and she's going to college next year. What are you hearing from her and her mates about college?
Sure. Your heart absolutely goes out to just the graduating class of 2020, because think about it, all those adolescent kind of milestones between prom and graduation that we've all benefited from, in some ways they're missing out on. So the prom, not as big of a deal. You know, there'll be other balls and those kinds of things to get dressed up. Graduation, likewise, our school has postponed graduation to July. I think that's optimistic in trying to think about getting these people together. They've said otherwise, we'll just do it virtually. Regarding college, obviously it's a huge milestone for them. Her and all of her friends are really excited about starting that next chapter in their lives. Several of our family friends have already received notices from their universities that, you know, we have every anticipation or expectation of having you join us in the fall physically. Just please understand, we're either going to look at pushing the fall start to spring, which again makes me question, do we really want to start in January, middle of the cold and flu season, or we'll start fall virtually. And it's, John, it's actually not even the students. They're all eager. They're all excited to go. Similar to Rhett's comment with his, child on asthma, as a parent, you fear for them to kind of be physically together. More importantly, the professors, right? A lot of these professors are in their 60s and 70s. It would be kind of irresponsible risk for them to take, to kind of come around not knowing who's got it. And could you move the desks apart? Sure. How are you going to, those facilities were built for thousands of these students. How are you going to do that? And they've talked about shifts and a lot of other options. I think we're going to be challenged. I think we're going to be challenged to think about education, just like we're talking about, think about work differently. And do they physically have to be there? Are there other ways to get the education, get the camaraderie, get the interaction? But it's certainly the experiences are going to have to, they're going to change. They're going to change very differently than I think when we all went to school.
And Lou, do you want to weigh in?
Right? There's no more fall football games where you're going and, with a crowd of 50,000 and
Can you imagine 80,000 people in a stadium? I mean, it's insane. And by the way,
you're talking about my hometown of Ann Arbor. We have 110,000. That's not going to happen this fall. But Lou, I want to give you a chance to jump in on the human side of. We talked very specifically about business and some culture and stuff. But what personal things are you hearing from your clients or colleagues that we haven't talked about? The human side of this change that we're going through, experiencing.
I think the strangest thing is calling a CHRO of a major Fortune 500 company and seeing him look like me on a Thursday, right? So it's just this. So he's on his exercise bike, just got off, full beard, and so it's just everything's so different. And as far as school is concerned, kids obviously are around and they're doing homeschooling, and you see them when you're on obviously on Zooms or other types of live shows. If I could give one thing though is to tell you about the co-creation aspects. I always go back to this, is that we have to keep our children and our own health and others' health in mind when we're creating it. As the four of us together as a group, we have one mind about how we really do believe the world should or ought to be after COVID and working back into society. Now, what if all of us did this, where we've had heart and mind in mind, right? When we create what the new normal should be, what if it's not about political affiliation or this, need to get back? And what if it's about just creating something new so that you can get back to work and still be safe? So I think people will have far less chaos and fighting and violence to come when we have these kinds of dialogues. You think back to how RFK stopped in Minneapolis, in Indianapolis, Indiana, stopped rioting after MLK had been assassinated. There's one city that didn't break out in riots because he did just what we're doing, dialogue groups. Had they not had dialogue groups, they would have all killed each other like they did in every other major city. I see that in the United States happening. So this dialogue is so important. And I'm so glad that you brought up kids, you brought up our children, our environments, because that's what we're talking about here. This isn't just about us. This is about our children. This is about our grandchildren. This is about our lives. And we need to put that front and center in our days and months and years to come.
Thank you. One thing I was going to ask you guys, sort of keeping along this sort of personal line, and you kind of covered it, Lou, a little bit, but this is for both of you. What, in all of this that's gone on, what has scared you the most? And what excites you the most about what's happening?
I think that the scariest part of this for me has been just the uncertainty, right? I think it's human nature. Our fight or flight just jumps into overdrive when we can't know, we can't predict. Nobody knows what the other side of this looks like. And as soon as you feel like you got your arms around, okay, I'm washing my hands, I'm keeping away from people, I'm restricting what my kids can do, we've always left our shoes outside, we're wiping groceries and boxes outside. So we're really practicing a lot of these things. And then, you kind of hear this latest episode in New York with kids and their blood vessels and heart issues, and Lou was talking about the shift in the culture. What happens with the second wave of this thing, right? So a lot of people believe in the US will peak in June, July, August will subside because of the heat. Get ready for round 2 in the fall and winter when it's the flu season, right? So what happens with iterations of this? We can't shut the global economy down every time this thing flares, right? So, and by the way, as frightening as you made it think, what about the next version of this, right? If we don't learn anything from this and learn to adapt our personal lives, our professional lives, which, by the way, they're also all blending, right? Forget work-life balance. It's now work-life blending, right? So how do we learn to adapt? And the scariest part is the uncertainty, the unknowns. How long will this last? How will it continue to impact livelihoods beyond just lives? I think that's for me, that's that uncertainty, which goes back to, again, relinquishing control, right? None of us can control the timeline, so worry about the things you can control.
Let me ask you, and Lou, I want you to answer the same question, but David, let me ask you this. Has this changed, and Lou, you can add your part to this second follow-up. Has it changed your conversations with your kids and your spouses? I mean, has it?
Unequivocally, yes. And I think it carries back to Lou's comment that you can see the CHRO dressed casually and the kids are around. And I think absolutely, we used to have head and heart conversations periodically. Now we're having them daily, right? So how you feeling? What's going on with you? What's happening? How do you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, my kids were ready to go on a mission trip to Ecuador, canceled. They were going to go to a faith-based camp, canceled. Summer camps, canceled. But all these things, plans that they had, just suddenly went out the window. So carry that family world to now our leadership positions and the leaders we work with. I think leaders have to demonstrate that personal care more than ever before. That empathy's got to not just be talked about, it's got to be amplified, which Lou can talk about that as well.
So my kids are knocking at the door right now, so I can tell you it's kind of an example of that. You know, what's interesting, you know, the fear I've had is also with my children, and with, you know, with my wife as well. I'll speak to it. I think the best adaptive behavior, if you think about it, you know, in fear is to fear sometimes, and because fear moves you to some action. There's some action. I mean, innovation moves you to action too. It's not necessarily a more or less of a you know, higher biological response, I think, than fear. People are acting upon fear for their economic lives, for their finances, and they're acting upon it at the expense of their health, which is something that I fear as well. I fear that as you go outside, it's almost like, you know, Night of the Living Dead. I mean, these people coming at you. You know, who do you shuck? Who do you weave? You have to learn how to box in a different way for people, right? And how do you? I bring my children out, and I see others who are upstairs, and I'm holding them literally close to me. I mean, these are small children, so. You know, as far as fear, you know, I have fear and then I have action, right? I take to keep them sort of away. And then we have social needs that children and we all have, that we have to go, how do we go back to camp? How do we have those interactions, those one-on-ones that probably can't be achieved through just this telecommunications aspects? So, right. You know, that's coming up too. Camp is a big thing as well, Nour. I hear you on that. And with children especially, you know, what's exciting about it? I will say this, like I have some guilt saying what's exciting about it, because I know how many people are suffering and how many people have died from this illness, and how many people have lost their jobs. And so I have a lot of guilt around the excitement question. So that's just that's who I am. It's just guilt. Because it's hard to really think about excitement when just there's so much pain out there. And it's not necessarily that I can empathize at this point, because I can't. It's sympathy. You know, for non-elective, elective surgeries, even if it's appendicitis or if it's gallbladder, you really can't go in these days. They're not going to do it. So we've redefined the way that we do surgeries. So we're not worried about sepsis anymore. We're not worried about infection anymore. We subside pain just because of a major pandemic. Wow, we've shifted our entire thinking. So, you know, so if you have, I'm not telling people to not go in if you have a gallbladder infection or your kidneys are about to burst or at all. I'm not a doctor. What I'm saying, though, is that if you do go in, they're going to hold you hostage. Right. So that's why I can't give empathy for this. It's sympathy, death, it's destruction, it's loss of jobs. I can't give the excitement. I can only say that I'm working the possible best I can to get in the stream to help, and that's why I'm with you guys today.
Yeah. Lou, and I think that's a very valid point as we get to our new future, and we're all excited about that and the energy that we have to recognize the loss. And it's loss of our loved ones, but it's loss of our colleagues. And for some of us, it's loss of our job, and with that, we're all professionals, and it's a loss of identity for someone. And so as we build a new future, it'll be men and women like you guys who are doing these things and pushing us forward. We also have to remember from where we've come. So that's my final thought for the day, I think. So
I was going to add that tactile is very much a human thing. We have this innate need to touch. And when we can't, you guys know me, I'm a hugger, right? And when you can't, unless you're going to wear a full hazmat suit, we're not going to be hugging anytime soon, right? So how do you, and you feel this sense of emptiness that you can't, hug and shake hands and, and really be close to other human beings. And it throws us off. Again, Martin Lindstrom calls it, this out of balance, and somebody else I heard it today call your rhythm, and I think of it as our equilibrium, and I think it's off, and we got to find ways. Going back to Lou's comment and building on John's, we have to find a way to get that groove back, and or find other ways to meet that need for that sense of touch.
It's painful as an extrovert, I have to say. I have to agree, man. You guys know I was on the road like you, 208 days last year. And not only my wife is asking, when are you getting back on a plane again? You miss going and seeing people. You miss, like I said, one of my favorite things was to have, lunch or dinner with clients and friends. And that, again, that interaction, I'd really miss.
Well, I thought of a new idea for you, Nour, when you talked about you being a hugger. How about a hugging suit? You put it out if you want to hug somebody.
There was a on one of the media channels last night where somebody has literally plastic, suits, and in between, it was a young woman who would build these things so she could hug her grandmother. And I'm thinking, I'm telling you, little more elegant than hazmat suits, but suits that protect us aren't that far behind. And some people, you post some of these ideas and they think it's really far fetched. You just wait. The longer this thing drags out, the more products and services that meet that unmet equilibrium that I just talked about are going to become more prevalent. I mean, for us to go out and interact and engage with other people, we're going to need some sort of barrier, some sort of that again protects us, right?
Hey, that is going to be $19.99. Get yours now. Get a free one. That is coming. Your hug suit.
That's our next Amazon product,
right?
That's what we should be doing. Yeah. All of us, we should do it. Want to get in?
It's like the Snuggie. Those little blanket things you can zip yourself up in. I love it.
Hazmat version, a filtered version.
We just created a product. See how quick and innovative we are. Well, guys, we're hitting the hour. I do want to thank you for joining us on this sort of inaugural episode of What's Next, and thank you so much. I know I learned a lot today. It was very, very, very meaningful. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Hey, thanks for having me. Good to
Lou and Nour, you're both exemplify what it means to be a thinker, a thought leader, and thought actor. So thank you, guys.
My pleasure. Our pleasure. Good to see you both. Thanks for having us. Good to be your test pilots on this. Hopefully Carter and I delivered.
You did.
Temple. Great to be you. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys.
Thank you for being here. We're going to be here every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, except next week we have Martin Lindstrom on What's Next, and I think that's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Wednesday night. And until then, we'll see you then.